Okay, so at 7:07, we're going to call the January 25th meeting of the Pembroke School Committee to order. We apologize to the folks watching at home on delay. There was a PAC TV issue that they couldn't resolve before the meeting, so we were not able to broadcast live as we have been in the past. So with that, the couple adjustments to the agenda. There are, for the folks who are here, this meeting is being recorded mainly for the purposes of our minutes, but it'll end up on our website potentially with a delay after PAC TV does their work. We do have two adjustments to the agenda: consideration for approval, the adjustments to the facilities usage form, and discussion of draft communication to DECA. So with that, the first thing up is the fiscal year 22 budget for certification. So just so everybody knows, we certified a single number previously, prior to town meeting, or after town meeting. And we need to certify the line items for the budget to be, I guess, accurate. So
in your packet, you have all 252 glorious lines of the FY22 budget totaling $35.5 million. They are in the categories that we haven't done any significant budget transfers of over 10%, or else I'd be asking you all for approval. They're in the same categories.
10,000, just for Sue and Lance, by policy, any budget transfer of over $10,000 needs a vote of the committee. We used to approve them all, but we moved that threshold up because of
right, and it's so by category. So if there's money moving from supply to supply, I don't need your approval, or salary to salary. It's just total in a category. So you guys use the category that's spelled out by the Chart of Accounts from the state for those designations. So everything is pretty much where we were in May.
Any questions on this? Okay, so is there a motion to certify the fiscal year 22 budget as presented?
Second.
So motion by Sue, second by Lance. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, it's unanimous. Okay, now fiscal year 23 budget.
So just a reminder to anybody that is joining us for the first time during this budget cycle, MOE stands for maintenance of effort. So that means doing everything we're doing this year at next year's prices, taking into account collective bargaining increases, contractual increases, give or take inflation. It's obviously not a one-for-one what inflation in the outside world looks like as far as education, but there are increases for utilities and a couple of other things. So as we just certified, our current FY22 budget is $35.5 million. Our maintenance of effort, which is FY23 budget, there's a typo on there, is $36,675,085. So that's a difference of about $1.1 million. And I always caution folks at this moment not to be frightened by that budget gap. You can see below historically where we have been at this time. There's a number of adjustments that happen on our maintenance of effort budget before it comes to the committee as an admin recommended budget. Those include any revolving fund offsets, any retirements. We'll talk a little bit tonight about what special education pre-buy looks like for us and what that would do to the number if we're able to continue the practice of pre-buying special education tuition. So you can see from the historical information below, we are in a better place than we have been in the last 5 or 6 years. But again, $1.1 million is still a large sum to solve for when you're talking about a budget that is 80 to 85% people and contractually obligated items such as special ed transportation, regular ed transportation, and tuitions for vocational and sped schools. Some of the major drivers for our increase are our collective bargaining agreements and cost of living adjustments. So if you're unfamiliar with what a salary schedule looks like for, I'm going to use teachers, but it's pretty similar for paraprofessionals, custodians, food service workers, etc. There's a cost of living increase as well as the opportunity to move steps within a grid. So for each year of employment here in Pembroke, you'd move a step. There's 11 steps on our teachers grid. So they move down steps over columns depending upon their educational credits. So if a teacher joins us with a master's degree, but over the course of their employment with us garners 15 additional graduate credits, they move into a different salary column that's called master's plus 15, etc. So there's a couple of different pieces to the salary schedule, not just a blanket COLA for everybody. As I said on the beginning slide.
It's really not a cost of living increase. Cost of living increase ties to a benchmark. These are contractually agreed to increases
Correct, but there's COLAs for our non-union employees, right?
Well, just
They're-
from the contracted, okay, go
Right.
ahead.
So I think the purpose of that is just to explain that there's, on top of, you know, a 2% increase, there's other pieces that feed
Understood,
into
yep.
what that looks like. This year, we were fortunate enough to do about $580,000 of special education tuition pre-buy. So tuition is the one item that you're able to pre-purchase, so that means we can use dollars from this fiscal year to pay for next year's expenses as far as tuition. You can pay up to a year's worth of collaborative special ed tuition and up to a quarter of a residential or private placement tuition. So with the funds that we had available at the end of the last fiscal year, due to some flexibility with some of the ARPA and ESSER funds, we were able to pre-buy about $580,000 worth of special ed tuition. Our goal is to do that again this year, and we are on track to have the money available to do that. If we are to do that, that brings down that gap that you had seen on the previous page. So we are on target to do a similar level of pre-buy, keeping in mind that we do have a couple of special education tuition placeholders for this current year and for next year. So those are students that are in the process of being placed or being evaluated or tested. I don't want to steal Jess's thunder, but I think she's going to talk a little bit during her presentation about the potential of bringing back a student from an out-of-district placement, which is something that the committee has really focused a lot of our energy on in the past, because it is always our goal to keep students engaged in this community, and the idea of bringing a student back is one that we really look forward to. We have a couple of things that are a little bit different this year as we start to think about the FY23 budget. We don't usually spend a lot of time thinking about summer programming for students, but again, with COVID and the interrupted learning that we've been talking about for quite some time now, we will be looking to build out some summer school programs for folks. We did do some pilot programs this past year with some literacy. Mary Beth talked at the last meeting about our amazing opportunity for the Acceleration Math Academies over the February and April breaks, so we'll look to build on some of those successes and offer some additional programming for students and families over the summer. Again, we are looking at the effects of some of the interrupted learning on our students, what that means for class size, what that means for additional materials and supports for our students as well. So those will be some of the things that you see coming up in the individual budget presentations. Historically, we talk a little bit about special education. This is more of a success slide than a problem than we've had in the past. So you can see our special ed tuition has stabilized a bit over the past couple of years. Special ed tuition is something that we often need to go back to the town and discuss move-in or a significant move-in or a change in placement that affects our budget, and that we're trying to solve for within the confines of the fiscal year, which is very difficult. But I can say with certainty that we are finally in a place where we're forecasting and budgeting in a manner that is consistent with the students that we have in front of us and the needs that they have as far as placements. So a 2.41% increase is definitely something that we can plan for. Again, there are a couple of placeholders in there. Some of them have the potential to settle in this fiscal year, and some of them will maintain for the following fiscal year.
Aaron, I know I wasn't here those two kind of crazy years.
They were crazy, Lance.
Is there any barometers that might tell us? Because here we are almost 4 years later, and the trend could be following that. Is there something that would pop up, or those are just unusual anomalies?
So those are anomalies in the sense that if you have a student that moves in that's in a residential placement, or that we have a student here that needs to go to residential placement, those are upwards of $350,000 for the year. So those big swings that you see are one or two kids. They're not, it's not a systematic change. So
One of our yearly asks is always to have, we've asked the reps if they could introduce legislation to have the budget follow that student, right? Because it never ends up working in your favor, it seems, but if it did, it still shouldn't be working in your favor that way. So that student was budgeted for in another district, that student moves in August, say. That money should flow, or the district should maintain that student until the end of the fiscal year. But unfortunately, that has fallen. It hasn't gone anywhere as much as we asked. So we just keep asking.
So again, depending on the timing of the move-in, the money does flow with the kid, but it doesn't necessarily work out in our favor very often.
Depending, but it doesn't, it's not all.
Yeah. Next slide. So just to talk a little bit about some of the focus areas that you'll hear over the next 7 weeks of presentations, including visual performing arts, technology, facilities, athletics, elementary and secondary. Teaching and learning and student services, our 3 focus areas continue to be the same: social emotional supports for students and for staff, achievement, obviously, and technology. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about each of the things that are there in the notes because our administrators will talk about them during their presentations. But it's important just to talk a little bit about the process and what that looks like for folks that are presenting. So I ask folks to present in a vacuum, right? So when Mark presents the high school budget, he is presenting as if Pembroke High School is the only thing we're doing here in Pembroke. The same for Jess when she does student services, or for Brandon when he does technology. That allows us the ability to have an exhaustive list of not just needs, but also wants as we talk about building out programs and building capacity. We then take that comprehensive list of asks and create a priority list and give things a priority 1, 2, or 3 designation. So though there hasn't been a time in my 12 years that we haven't started in a deficit when we're starting this process, I think it's important for our administrators and our department leaders to have vision and goals for their department, and those obviously require resources. But I do want to make sure that people are still building goals, even though we're often asking folks to cut down in their department. So it's a good exercise for our administrators to kind of go through in an ideal world, what would I need to make my building or my department as successful as I want it to be. Again, there's a couple of things in here that are new to us because of some of the COVID pieces. Again, the tutoring model is something that was really exclusive to our Title I schools in the past, but we've expanded to all 5 buildings due to the interrupted learning and the access to some additional dollars for that. Class sizes have been something that we've talked a lot about, whether we're going to look at smaller class sizes at the elementary level or doing a better job of balancing class sizes at the 7 through 12 grade level. But again, these will come up in extensive detail over the next couple of weeks when folks do their presentations. As I said, this is the first step. There's a bunch of steps that happen between now and the next time you get a full budget from us. So the next time you get a budget from me will be in April when you get an admin recommended budget. Some of the work that happens behind the scenes, both with Budget Sub, with the administrators, and with other town officials, whether it's the select board or advisory board, will all feed into that presentation. So we're going to continue to look at special education pre-buy. As I said, there's a couple of placeholders there and some things that need to be firmed up. Looking at elementary class size, I did do some projections that are in the slides that I'll move forward with you. We generally look at elementary class size to see if there's a bubble or if there's a place where we could make a reduction if we needed to. I can say with pretty great certainty that our elementary class size in enrollment is pretty static. So there's not a place where there's a bubble or a really small class. So I don't anticipate adding or necessarily reducing from any of those. We talk a lot in every budget cycle about what the specialist schedule looks like. We have a lot of interest in looking at some of our specialists and what we can do with some flexibility. There was a time when most of our buildings had 4 or 5 sections of each grade. We're more in the 3 sections of each grade realm now, and so there is some flexibility within those specialist schedules, and we want to look at that and make sure that we're using the time in the way that makes the most sense. If you've been joining us here in this library for our meetings, you'll know that we went from a computer lab to an innovation lab. You can see the green screen. So there's been some transition in the library specialists in particular, but we want to take a look at all 4 specialist rotations in the elementary buildings and make sure that we're using them in the best way. Support structure can mean a multitude of things. In the past, we focused a lot of our energy on social workers having a social worker at each building. I'd anticipate some more conversation about social emotional supports for students in the form of social workers, paraprofessionals, some of those BCBA and RBT tutors that we added with some contracted services that we're using some of the ESSER funds for. We're having some really great success with that model, especially with some of our most difficult behavioral students, and so it's something that I'm sure Jess will highlight during her presentation about wanting to continue with. We always struggle with having the right balance of program offerings and level of student choice while still maintaining an efficient and effective schedule. We've come a long way in the past few years, whether it's the shift from pure elective offering back to the orbits at the middle school, taking a look at some student-driven data at the high school to inform elective offerings, and then my favorite conversation of the year, fees. So all of that will happen before we bring back to you an admin recommended budget, as well as all the priority work that I spoke of. Just a quick timeline for folks on kind of where we're at. Obviously, January is super early. We don't have any state numbers just yet. We should be getting them this week if all works out, but usually it's a little bit delayed.
Doesn't the governor have to submit it tomorrow?
It does, but last year it was delayed because of COVID, so I'm just
Yeah.
wondering if the same will happen. But, you know, the governor's budget is our first glimpse at Chapter 70. Thankfully, in the past, it has been the floor. It's usually $20 or $25 a student is the increase that we see here in Pembroke. It's gone up to $30 a student over the course of the budget cycle in the past few years. Again, as I said, there'll be some budget subcommittee work that happens, meeting with the town administrator, town accountant, and the advisory board, as well as the select board to talk about our budget and our budget priorities. I do know that the town manager, Bill Chenard, is presenting a budget to the select board next Wednesday. So we've had some preliminary conversations about what he has in there for us as a placeholder, given the fact that our budget cycle kind of runs parallel to theirs. A lot of departments have already completed their budget work, but we're really just starting ours. And we're always working backwards from the town meeting date, which is May 10th this year, 2022. That's it.
Questions?
The presentation does have class sizes in it, so I'll resend it to you also. You have the data.
Questions at all? Stephen? I have 3 quick questions in a request. Any idea from Bill what his target is for us?
Nope. He said Thursday he will have an idea of where he's working.
Okay. What does if this $25 for Chapter 70, remind me what that's going to look like based upon the October 1st?
It's just about 68,000.
Okay, that's if Chapter 70 stays flat and we just get $25 per pupil, right?
Yep.
Okay. Special education circuit breaker, the funding came in higher than I think we anticipated, but we're using the first quarter this year, which is the first time.
Right. We're using a portion of it. We didn't actually have to use the whole first payment.
Yeah.
The reimbursement rate is up over 75% for this year, which is greater than the 68% I think we were
What's
budgeting off
the
of.
expectation for this year's revenue? Ballpark for circuit breaker?
A little over 1.1 million.
And so net, what would be committed to this year of the 1.1?
Right now, it's only 180. So we have about
So
$1 million left.
So basically, it's 1.1, basically there's 900 there. But that has to be a pre-buy, got it, okay.
Yep.
And the request is ESSER monies. We haven't received a update in a couple of months. Can we just get, not for a
Sure.
presentation?
Yep.
For next week, can you just give us where it stands by?
Absolutely. Yep.
By expiration?
Absolutely. I'm excited to share with you that our SR3 grant was just approved yesterday, and that's the one with the capital piece into it. So we've been
Yeah.
waiting to bid the rooftop units till we knew exactly how many we're asking for. So they finally approved the capital piece, but I'm happy to give an update next week.
So
on
yeah,
that.
if we
Yep.
could get a grid, which
Yep.
is
Yep.
the grant,
When it expires, what we use. Yep.
yep, and then what it can be used for, because different grants
Yep.
can be used for different pieces.
Sure. Yeah, we're technically still working on our SR1 money. That needs to be spent this year. That's what you're doing the
That's-
bulk of the
yeah.
tutoring with.
Yep,
So
I'm just trying to
yep.
figure out when you say has to be spent, that has to be expended and invoiced
Correct.
by, can we make sure that's clear on the document?
Sure.
For anybody who doesn't see it, because that's where it starts to get hairy.
Yep.
I got asked this question a few weeks ago, that's why I want to,
Yep. Absolutely.
what are the questions? Okay. What do we have next? Social studies, right?
Program of studies.
We're going to do this with what we've done the past few months. We're going to hold the comment until after her report, just because she probably will get through a lot of what the questions are. I hope they are.
Hopefully.
If they're not, then we'll make sure we can always backtrack. It just makes it a little bit more efficient. Hopefully, she's going to.
You still need to do your minutes for December 21st.
I knew that. I have that here. I figured to say that at the very end.
So in your packet, you have a number of documents associated with the Pembroke High School Program of Studies. Many of them should look familiar to you because they're the same ones that we gave you in December. But since we've met in December, Education Sub had a chance to meet the week before last just to talk about the proposals and what the recommendations are moving forward. The feedback that we did get at the December meeting was that you were looking for us to add some additional career information into the pathways. So there is a document in your packet that outlines some potential careers depending upon the pathways. I'm not sure if you all have specific questions about any of the proposals. Mark, Mary Beth, myself, Ed Sub, we're happy to answer anything you have, but I do think it's important to focus and point out that these pathways are a huge step for us. This is something we have been really trying to get some traction with for at least the past 5 years. You know, again, some of this has a budgetary component to it, so you'll hear some of it come up in Mark's presentation as well as the teaching and learning presentation. I remind you that anything that we've proposed only runs based off of student interest. So you're just approving for it to be published in the program of studies. Whether students select it or not determines whether or not we run it.
Questions, Lance, Steve?
No, I mean, I think this is something that will, as a district, puts us kind of on the forefront, right? Makes us relevant. I was talking with my sister who's a high school history teacher in New Hampshire, and she's like, they're just starting to think about it. And there's sort of a quasi-charter school, kind of community school up there. And she's like, it's awesome that you guys are doing that. And I think it's great to see. We've had this dialogue for 5 years now, right? And so to be at this point, the work that's been put in, I thank those guys that have been working on this. I think the paths that we can start with are great because they're tangible. And then from there, we can continue to move that process on. It really helps put our students in a good place to move forward. So,
Right, the goal is to build out the manufacturing pathway, which is a little bit more capital intensive. So that's, you know, what you see here is really, we did gauge student interest, obviously, as well as kind of some of the things that we can use existing resources to do with a minimal infusion of whether it's materials or even staff. So, you know, the budget ask for this is really a staff person in the form of a half-time teacher and a half-time program coordinator. It's really important that there's a face to the program, that students know who to connect with, that same face of the program is doing the community outreach and working with businesses and that piece of it. So it's not something we could internalize right now. There just isn't the capacity to do it with the current staff. So.
No, good.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I'm really excited about this. I feel like this is going to really propel us toward the future. I mean, a lot of work has gone into it, and I'm just very impressed by everything that was put together. And I'm excited to see it happen.
I know the business community, Mary Beth, from our conversations last year, I don't even remember. Was
Last spring, yeah.
Last spring, was that long ago? They're excited to do it, and they're excited to participate, and they gave us some good feedback on what to do and how to do it, and they'll be big supporters, which is great. I do have two quick questions one on the class and one on just the cost piece. Physical science, the question on that is that a sophomore, junior, senior year? Which grade or grades are you targeting? Because it didn't look like a freshman class to me. And that was my first question around it. And second, I know we try not to do prerequisites, but what is going to be the guidance for a student before they get into it? Because the course, it seemed to be very advanced. At least, and maybe I'm missing something. Am I getting it?
So it's a college prep class, it's
Okay.
not an honors level class.
Got it, okay.
And the goal behind it is for our students who are leaving biology at the end of 9th grade. Our requirement is 3 years of science at the high school. And sometimes kids are not quite ready to jump into chemistry in 10th
Okay.
grade. So oftentimes or physics in 10th grade, so they've been taking some of the other electives. We felt that this elective was more pertinent to them completing either physics or chemistry by junior year. So this gives them a preview of both those disciplines with hands-on lab work, with, you know, a certified physics teacher or chemistry teacher to guide them through that process. So it's, in some ways, it's a great opportunity for kids to get a preview of those two very difficult science electives, which in our, you know, we require students to pass before they graduate from.
Okay, which
Pembroke.
explains, because I
Yeah.
saw it, you had, I don't remember talking, I just remember seeing it online. Because you're breaking into like, I think 4 different sections of the class where it was written up. So that's why it's more of an exploratory class.
Oh, the way that it was written,
Don't-
yes.
I
So
can't-
Jonathan Shapiro gave you an extensive outline
Yeah,
of
okay.
what the
Which is
chemistry
good.
Tuesday, they'll
component.
be learning this on
Yes.
Thursday.
Yeah.
No,
So
I got that,
it-
I couldn't I wanted to get
Yes.
my hands around where it was.
So
and
those
was
are
it
the
duplicative?
state
Got it.
standards that
Yep.
will be introduced to students, but it's a very, actually, in contrast to how, you know, demanding those standards look, it's an introductory opportunity for students, but we think it's a really rich class in terms of the concepts for students to be able to preview prior to those two very big heavy hitters, chemistry or physics, so.
Right, definitely the physics is,
Yeah.
I know, you absolutely completely understand. The other question I had on the budget implications, I saw in each of the classes, you know, they were like, okay, the text could be 1, 2, or 3. When you figure out the budget for that, I know we have a bucket for textbook refresh. Are we anticipating using what is going to be in that line item? Is this in addition to? I'm just trying to understand, so when we do get the budget, is it going to be in an either or is it a no? If we approve these, that's going to take, if we approve these and they run, that's going to take the first X of the textbook money, which I think is like 125,000, if I remember correctly.
So there's a couple of different avenues for purchasing textbooks. Each of the buildings has a textbook and supply line.
Yep.
And then on top of that, we have $125,000 in district-wide curriculum. So when we're talking about a math adoption or an overhaul of Spanish text, it comes from the district-wide line. Some of the smaller things come from the school-based line. So if we're looking to get, 5 more algebra books, it comes from the school-based line. In the past couple of years, when our budget has been tighter than in other years, some of the purchases that would have been a district purchase have gone back to the building level.
Okay.
But I anticipate these being part of Mary Beth's request as teaching and learning as opposed to, so part of that 125.
Got it. That's what I wanted to figure out where it was coming from. Got it. Because you're only buying usually one section of textbooks for these.
Correct.
Right, got it, okay. That's all.
And everything's electronic as well.
Yeah, and they
so,
offer,
yeah.
right, now they give you the hardcover if you buy the electronic, right?
Right, and there's also a tremendous amount of free material out there at this point, too.
I just want to make sure if the first process happens, we approve it, students sign up for it.
The materials will be there.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, got it. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, is there a motion to approve the changes to the PHS Program of Studies as presented?
So moved.
Motion by Sue, second by,
Lance?
thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, perfect. And are we going to, where are we going?
Let's do the surplus materials.
We'll do surplus.
So in your packet, you have a letter regarding the amazing projector project that's been happening. So instead of projectors on carts at our elementary level, we finally have wall-mounted projectors in all of our regular ed classrooms, understanding that the intent is obviously to expand that to some of our specialists and special education classrooms, but the beginning goal was regular ed. So we have about 106 projectors that used to be on carts that are surplus at this time. You can see, again, your role deeming them surplus allows us to dispose of them in the any mean that we see fit, which oftentimes is recycle. But in this instance, there is some sale value to these. So there are a couple of staff members in particular, and with the deeming of surplus, I'm happy to reach out to other town departments to see if anybody has a need for some of these projectors and laptops. So.
Is there a motion to approve the surplus request as presented?
So moved.
Motion by David, second by,
Sue?
thank you. Any further discussion or questions?
So again, this follows with the surplus. It's up to the district's discretion. If we find after-school groups or things that could benefit from it, we'll look for best option. with it.
Right, so obviously we'll sell as many as we can for revenue, and then, these are more of an item that is more attractive for donation than some of the other things that we've deemed surplus in the past, so.
Sounds good.
That makes sense.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, it is unanimous, thank you. All right.
Do you want me to just keep going?
You know,
Facilities use, and check it out.
why don't, you know what, why don't we take that, we'll take that in the minutes at the end.
Okay.
Unless people really want to hear the facilities usage request discussion.
I think it's
which I'm guessing
exciting,
that.
but
But I wanted to get
Let me just pull up the
the
other.
budget stuff first.
I was going to
we
suggest
buy one?
taking one of the surplus.
See the SAPs to online.
Yeah, go from 3 hours to 2 hours. What?
This is like the
Everyone
technical
gather around the
difficulty
laptop?
night.
Yeah, they're gonna go from 3 hours to 2 hours.
And they said the turnaround time will go from days
Yeah,
to get your results.
I'm curious whether they're gonna reduce the cost.
I was interested, they didn't talk about the cost.
So the college board, they took a ton of criticism, I don't know why, because they are sitting on just a plethora of cash.
Oh,
You know, like a lot of those,
did it unplug?
you know, pseudo nonprofits, I guess you call it. And what are they gonna do with that? Because they, you know, they had the market corner. They were under pressure because the ACT was gaining momentum, at least when Ryan was going through it. And now it's gone back to the SAT. While that's firing up, is what's on the first or second slide critical to your presentation? Can you talk through that part? The cover slide, absolutely. I get the cover slide. Usually slide. Can you start talking while somebody else tries to get that up, just so we can get going? I'm not trying to rush it, but yeah, putting so much pressure.
I'm prepared. I made you guys copies.
There you go. We got
Mark, anyone?
There's enough. Mark can have one.
Yeah, thank you.
So, another installment of COVID updates. The first slide talks about our current COVID cases. As of today, we have 26 active student cases, so 26 out of 2,566 students. It's just about 1% of our student population that is currently positive. For staff, we have 4 staff members out of 373 total staff, so again, a 1% positivity rate amongst students and staff. We have come significantly far from where we were that first week of January following winter break. I know sometimes our numbers seem a little bit disconnected to the town numbers. If you've been tuning into some of the other board presentations on the town side, there's been talk of an increase in numbers. What we're seeing here is a decrease on the school side.
So 2 things, so people can't see, just so you're aware, it's 4 Bryantville, 7 at Hobmock, 5 here in North Pembroke, 4 PCMS, and 6 at PHS. Teachers, 2 at Bryantville, 1 at Hobmock, 1 at PCMS, for a total of 4. Can you just real quick on that, just, do they all, is the distribution for falling off over 5 days, roughly 5 each day, or will they fall off at a greater rate?
So there's 8 for tomorrow, and then it's about 4 for the next few days. All of this is on the dashboard on the website too, if folks want to check that for more frequent updates. We do update the dashboard multiple times a day as new cases are brought to the nurses, but I can tell you based off of the volume of email I've received from the nurse, there's been very few cases over the past couple of days that have come in. So
Okay.
great news.
So,
Yeah.
so the number of cases are going down.
Yes.
Of the cases we've had in the district, have we experienced hospitalizations
No.
for students or staff?
no.
Okay, thank you. Okay. good.
None.
None, sorry, yeah.
Big
That
zero.
is. Yep, that's why I asked the question. Okay,
Okay. On the next slide, if you could see slides, is the
do
vaccination.
we have another one? Can we take one out of a classroom?
No, because they're on the wall. Were you
These are all
listening?
new ones. I know, because they're all,
It's the surplus.
sorry. We'll work on it, I promise.
So the next slide is about vaccination percentages. So every Tuesday, the nurses at the secondary level do update the vaccine percentages. At Pembroke High School, we are currently 76.98% vaccinated. So that reflects 679 total students and staff out of 882. You'll remember that the magic number is 707, and we are very close to that. I do want to say that there is some, it is definitely gossip, but I'm happy to say conversation that sounds a little bit more encouraging, that following February break, that the state will lower the number to 75% for the vaccine threshold. But again, that is still kind of on the outskirts. It hasn't come through DESE yet. Even in that case, I'm pretty confident that at the high school, we will be at that 80% very shortly. There are a couple of students that have 1 vaccine, and once they get the second dose, it'll push us up over. We did reach out to staff a second time to remind them that if they hadn't done the self-attestation, that they should please go in and do that. And we did get 7 staff members this week that went in and did it.
So Another question, sorry. Because the magic number right now is 28 individuals at the school. We're going off of for the students, you're going off of the state database?
The state database.
Or if they tell us, because
This-
they've opted out of the state database, correct?
Both. So it's a combination of both. So if you are a family who opted out of the MIIS state database, but your student is vaccinated, please reach out to the school nurse so that she can confirm that and that your student's included in that number. A reminder that being vaccinated per DESE requirement is just 2 doses of the Pfizer or Moderna and 1 dose of the Johnson & Johnson. There is no conversation about booster when it comes to being fully vaccinated per DESE.
Can we send a reminder to folks saying if you've opted out of the database?
Absolutely. Mark can put that in his weekly reminder.
And let's see if we can get that, let's see if we can get to the 28.
Sure.
Have we gotten, oh, I'm sorry.
Save to the
There's no questions.
Right now, absolutely. When have we ever not allowed?
You just have to come up to the microphone if you want to ask a
Yeah.
question. Yep,
So I know the magic number is 8.
Yeah.
correct.
So I was told that Norwell actually met that number.
Yep.
And they got the masks taken, you know, they didn't have to wear them. But now I'm heard that they're back to wearing masks.
Yep.
Can
It's
you?
a school decision, because once you're granted it,
It's up to this
so
board to decide.
There's two things that have to happen. One is you have to apply for the waiver and get it, have it granted, then you have to make the decision to go along with the waiver. Now, because of, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, but the way we worded our motion back in August, I think it was, I think that second meeting, August 3rd, to follow the DESI guidance, if we got the waiver, we would immediately.
Right,
vote.
you don't need to
We
meet
don't
to
need that
talk about
second
it.
piece. We've already taken action on piece 2, on the second
Right.
part of that. We just need the first part to happen.
Once they got their 80%, DESI granted Norwell the permission to say yay or nay on the masks.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so what happened in Norwell is I think, right, I think because they saw a similar increase that we saw after winter break, that they chose to do a 2-week masking period to see if they can get the numbers to come down. Other districts like Cohasset didn't, right? They've
Okay.
continued to be maskless and kind of have followed the same trajectory as we have. So once we get to 80% at the high school, we can immediately transition to masks being optional. I think it's important to point out that the last correspondence from DESE and DPH, you'll remember in the beginning, there was a lot of conversation at this board about creating a subgroup of folks that would be required to continue to mask because they were not vaccinated. Per DESE and the DPH guidance, it did say if you were unvaccinated, you still needed to mask. That has changed to highly recommend. So again, there's no, mask police at any of our buildings, and it would be similar to the way it is everywhere. It would be the honor system, very, very similar to the conversation that the committee had on August 24th about it being an option for any student or family or staff member to mask if they chose vaccinated or unvaccinated.
Okay. I mean, no coughing
No.
into the sleeve and
No,
stuff like
it's up
that.
to you. Masking would be optional.
It's a personal decision.
Right.
When you do your update on the letter that came out, can you also, there was something in that letter talking about transmission rates, if you remember?
Yep.
Right, I know it was a 4-page, right? They talked about state transmission rates among students was like 2%.
I'm going to get to that.
Okay, I want to make sure, because I didn't see it in your notes. Go ahead.
Jeez.
I just want to ask one quick question. Once we hit the 80% threshold, we apply for the waiver, is it automatic?
It's probably a 24-hour turnaround.
Oh, it
so,
is, okay,
yeah,
that was
it's
my
very
question.
fast.
It
Yep.
may
And
take
have
3
we-
weeks to do it.
And along those lines, have we heard anything back from DESE about, have they responded to any districts about letters?
No.
Yes, they did.
Well, Middleborough, they sent the letter that,
They
we didn't get a
They
response here.
responded to Sandwich after the first of the year, and they said they wouldn't respond at that time because they are under pending litigation. I can bring it out, it was on the MASC listserv end of last week or over the weekend. I could even give you the name of the member.
So we haven't received anything.
Let
but-
me,
I'd love to.
I'll tell you, I'll get you the email.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Looking at the middle school, The middle school has made some tremendous gains over the past couple of weeks when it comes to vaccination status. You'll remember the last time I reported on January 4th, they were in the mid-60s. They're at 71.12%. Again, there's 40 students that have received their first dose, so I'd expect this number to go up over the course of the next week or two. But at that 70% threshold, we said we would begin to gather staff data. So I am pretty confident that the middle school is going to get to the 80% before the high school, but again, we're really happy for anybody to get to that threshold. So we'll begin collecting staff attestation data tomorrow, and hopefully by next week we'll be at the 80% at the middle school, because some of those 40 first doses will turn into fully vaccinated over the course of the week. So talking about the updating testing protocol. So you'll remember in September, we talked a lot about the test and stay program that the state was offering for districts to create a opportunity for students to miss less in-person learning when they were deemed a close contact, allowing them to test in school for 5 days with the rapid by next now testing, and as long as they were negative, they were able to rejoin their class and continue with instruction for the day. The state is looking to phase out the test and stay program. It's my recommendation that we move in the direction that the state is moving in. So what that looks like is discontinuing test and stay and contact tracing at the schools. Again, there's an effective date of 2/4 on this. Some of the pieces associated with this require us to get the home test for folks. So what that looks like is staff and family would electronically opt in to the test at home program. So this is, you'd be receiving a home antigen test kit every other week, allowing you to test once weekly because there's 2 tests in each kit. So any staff or family that has opted into the program would receive a test. Everybody doesn't blanketly get a test. What this allows us to do, this is a far greater testing opportunity for folks. You'll remember that all of our test and stay is predicated on the fact that you need to be unvaccinated in order to participate, and we all know that that isn't necessarily the case when it comes to what we're seeing as positive. So this is open to any student or staff member, regardless of vaccination status, can participate in the at-home testing piece to it. And again, it's totally optional. As a family, you don't have to participate. As a staff member, you don't have to participate. You get 1 test kit, so 2 tests every other week, so you can test weekly. The remaining test and stay kits, because we do have a pretty good supply of them here in the district, would be used for optional symptomatic testing. So if a student or a staff member is exhibiting symptoms of COVID in school, it allows the nurses an opportunity to test them. We don't have that right now. This gives us some flexibility there. Again, totally optional. As a parent, if the nurse calls you and says your child has a headache and a fever, would you like me to test them? You can say no and just pick them up. Anytime a student has a fever, they can't be in school for 24 hours. Again, still totally optional for students and for staff to participate in that. Anytime an at-home test gives a positive result, we still ask that you report that to both the school nurse and the local Board of Health. I know our families have been great about sharing with us their positive test results on their home tests. It's also important that you loop in the Board of Health as well so that they have an accurate count of positive tests within the town. I think the contact tracing is the piece that's the biggest shift. So we'd no longer be identifying close contacts at school. There you can see that DESC has obviously been collecting data for 2 years as far as school cases, school-based transmission, school-based spread. It has been made abundantly clear that close contacts in school are highly unlikely to contract or spread COVID-19. You can see the test positivity rates in the next bullet. Of the 503,312 tests and stay tests that were given, 98.6 of those tests administered were negative. A very small portion of folks that are identified as close contacts end up contracting the virus over that 7-day window that we've been testing students. What this allows our school health professionals to do is to shift to symptomatic individuals. And I don't just mean COVID symptomatic individuals. So a lot of our nurses' resources and time has been taken up focused on COVID, and we talk a lot about the connections that our students have with staff in our building and making sure that students have a trusted staff member that they can talk to. For a lot of our kids, that's the school nurse. I got a 7th grade frequent flyer at my house, and I think this allows our school nurses to get back to that support role for our students. I think that we've gotten to a place where it's not encouraged to go see the nurse. We have teachers giving out ice packs and Band-Aids, and I think this gets the nurses back to their more traditional role of supporting students. shifting away from contact tracing at school allows us some flexibility. It allows us to shift back to traditional cafeteria seating at all of our schools. Again, obviously the shift will take a little bit of time. You know, at the high school, we had been planning on doing this for semester 2 anyways. At the middle school, there are cafeteria tables in there, and at the elementary schools, obviously it will take us a couple of days to move out the desks if the committee votes to transition to the at-home testing program. It also allows us some additional flexibility in classroom seating and arrangements. You know, there's so many photos out there of those desks in rows, 3 feet apart, all facing forward. Our teachers have been really great and creative about creating opportunities for students to collaborate and do group work, and a lot of that has to do with flexible seating. So this allows us to get back to that because we're not looking to contact trace in the classrooms if there's a positive case. I skipped the timelines, I apologize. Again, obviously you've seen that the mask mandate has been extended through February 28th. This testing option that I'm recommending to the committee tonight is in place for districts starting on 1/24 through April 2nd, at which point they'll reevaluate to see if any changes need to be made to the program. Obviously, with your vote tonight to transition to the new testing system, we're not on a 1/24 timeline because that was yesterday. We would be a week out from that, so it's a 2/4, which is next Friday.
Questions first here, and then I can tell you the response sandwich. I do have a question. So you'd be looking, hold on, give us 2 minutes, I promise. So you would be asking us to shift to at-home the testing protocol, ceasing test to stay, but would we want to put a date certain or some type of qualifier on in case this Commonwealth changes again?
So I'm asking for you to transition to the at-home testing option, cease, test and stay, and contact tracing.
Okay.
Some districts have already started, so I don't anticipate there being a problem with that. For us, it's just getting in the pipeline for the test. Because
Okay.
you all had a formal discussion about this in September and voted to participate in test and stay, you
we
have to
back it up,
talk about
which
not
is okay.
participating.
Yep, which is fine. So,
Yep.
okay, so the motion you'd be looking for is shift to the at-home testing protocol and cease test to stay and contact tracing.
Correct.
As of today?
2/4.
As
So
of-
we have to get, so the way that the tests work is that the first, teachers have to, or staff have to have an opportunity to go in and opt into the program, and families need to have an opportunity to opt in and opt into the program. And then tests are shipped every other week. So the first
fine.
week it's staff,
Got
the
it.
next week it's students, and it goes like that through.
Got it, okay. Just real quick for this thing here, and then see if people have questions on what we're going to be looking for a motion. I'm not going to read part of it because it was a long email from Kevin Saralt of the Sandwich School Committee. He said, and I'm going to read, just part of a paragraph. Our first 2 letters, September 8th and October 20th, received no response. We submitted a 3rd letter on November 17th, but I would suggest that the DESE reply of December 10th was non-responsive, similar to Middleborough. We sent a 4th letter on January 5th, which was similar to ours. That reiterated the request of the previous letters. We received an email reply stating that DESE could not comment due to pending litigation. And then he goes on to a bunch of other stuff. So that's probably why we haven't got a response, but somebody got a response to that type of letter, and they're citing pending litigation. So I just wanted to, that came across on Saturday, okay? Okay, so before we allow anybody to ask questions or comments, just let me see if we can get a motion, or if there is there a desire to put a motion on the table to shift to at-home testing protocol, ceasing test to stay, and contact tracing as of February 4th.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Sue, second by David. Let me let these guys see if they want to say anything, and then just go. I'm not going to collect the list. If you could just, I think you know how we try to get comment. Just try to keep it as,
Perfect. That's what I need.
I feel bad for everybody out there, but that's okay. Any questions or comments here? Good?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're saying is that we're basically going back to normal classrooms as long as we.
Right, the flexibility's there to be creative with your seating arrangements. I mean, if you walk around North, there's not necessarily every kid in a row right now. There's been teachers that have been using some flexible seating arrangements, even with the 3 feet of spacing, but it allows more flexibility for some of I know at the secondary level, there's a lot of circles and, kind of discussion circles that happen. I know in languages, they're all often looking to face each other when they're talking, and this gives them the ability to do that and for us to be more flexible when we're thinking about that for students.
That's great.
Good?
Yep.
Pam, I'll let you go first. And Maureen, you can go right behind her.
That's the best I could do for the podium, Pam. I try my best.
Podium. I had a question. I had emailed Erin and Susie, and I apologize. I just realized that you could go on and you could do the whole school board, but I am going to kind of go over that email because I don't know for everybody that's listening. But I stand here to follow up with you regarding my urgent request sent by email on January 18th, in which I questioned why our school kids are eating lunch in the cafeteria with single desks all facing forward and looking at the back of our fellow students' head rather than sitting at a regular lunchroom table like neighboring schools such as Hanover and Hingham. Erin, your response was that you and the board elected to keep several additional safety measures, best practices in place from the previous year, and that DESE DPH guidance requirements requires students to be 3 feet apart when eating, and desk eases the burdens on the school nurses when it comes to contact tracing. You went on to state that with the potential shift, like we're learning, away from test and stay and contact tracing in the coming days ahead, there's something you would be happy to bring up with the school committee at the meeting tonight, and that you've already talked about how the social aspect of lunch is very important to students and their mental health. In response, I acknowledge that at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of uncertainty. But seeing how it all is playing out, I don't feel we should be putting any added stress on our kids. I question why Pembroke needed to be so drastic in their measuring as neighboring towns were given the same guidelines as us, and the protocols weren't as harsh. For instance, I sent a picture of the Hanover school system. They're all sitting around a normal table, and we're all sitting in a row as if we're in a classroom. Almost like it was, deterring socialization. I find our current situation an overreach and authoritative, and ask that this be handled as an emergent situation given the mental health crisis going on. I also shared with you a picture of neighboring towns' lunchrooms in which kids were allowed to sit at tables with their peers, not in a row. I did not receive a reply to that, so I'm here to once again reiterate my concerns, not only with the lunchroom seating, but with the masking mandate being forced upon our children. I was unable to attend the January 4th meeting, but watched it and wanted to say thank you, especially to Susie and Susan, and that I echo your feelings. I think that we're all done with COVID at this point, and it should be up to the parents to make informed decisions about their children. We do not need DESE or Mr. Riley to tell us what to do. This issue is not about whether you're vaccinated or masked. It's about the coercion placed upon our school and the children taking away their freedoms and rights. We tried following Hanover's lead and sending a letter to DESE, asking them to allow the individual districts to be able to make decisions regarding mandates, and this was ignored. If we can't get a response from someone who is demanding this be done, then why are we complying? It makes no sense that if we can attend a school function, we need to wear masks, but anywhere else it's different. Boston allows kids to participate in track at the Reggie Lewis Center and attend field trips at the Museum of Science if kids wear a mask, but they don't have to be vaccinated yet. If the parents want to go and chaperone or cheer on their child, they need to be vaccinated. Rules are being derived based upon conveniences, so this alone should tell you something. I don't judge a person over their right to choose, and it's sad that the mandates are creating such hatred and segregation, due in part from all the anxiety this pandemic has caused. People are afraid to speak up in fear of being ostracized. I see this happening daily. Although I am appreciative of all of you, I also question the school board, who openly admitted that the mandates are overreaching, why you allow our kids to be threatened with detention and why they're constantly being told to pull up their masks. Why do you make such a big deal out of it if you don't agree with it? Erin, I know these instances have been brought up to your attention in past meetings and by email, and we were told it would be addressed. But if this is so, why does it continue? DESE doesn't have our kids' best interest at heart, and Mr. Riley is a bully and a tyrant for threatening to hold funds if we do not comply, and companies that give incentives for complying with mandates are like child predators. By complying to mandates rather than choosing for ourselves, we're consenting to this tyrannical and unjust behavior, and we're basically throwing in the towel to our freedoms and everything we stand for. Enough is enough. As parents, we have the God-given right to do what's best for our children. I've heard from a few students at the high school that they plan to do a walkout one day, and Mr. Talbot basically threatened them that there would be punishment if they did so. If my child wanted to walk out to protest and did so peacefully and respectfully, I would applaud him. I always tell him that he should stand up for what he believes, and it's okay to question those in authority as long as it's respectful. When I was growing up, I was always taught to respect your elders and do as you're told. Now, it's to be respectful, stand up for your rights, and it's okay to question those in authority. Just recently, I attended a Pembroke art performance. While walking in to take a seat, I heard Mr. Talbot make a point to say, "I love those masks." Why? There's no need for this type of comment and to promote what's being mandated. I then proceeded to watch the kids sing and play their instruments in their masks. The students that played the wind instruments had splits cut into the masks, which basically makes them even more non-productive. However, there was one mask that really stuck out to me. It was a zipper face mask. The student would unzip her mask when it was time to play her instrument and then zip it back up after she was done. This is extremely symbolic of what we are teaching our kids. It is deterring them from using their First Amendment rights and basically saying, shut up and do as you're told. Erin, as you mentioned in your email to me, our students' mental health is very important, and I couldn't agree with this more. However, I feel that this is being played with, and this is not okay. Our children's pursuit of happiness is their inherent and universal right. This being said, the human brain isn't fully developed until the age of 25. So this is even more of a reason to be fighting for our kids, teaching them to have a voice and be respectful, not letting them believe that coercion is normal. This is a perfect time to teach our kids the United States Constitution, not mold them into being afraid to use their voices. This lesson alone has so much more value than any standardized test. We're at a tough time in history, and it's important for us to be able to look back on this and be proud of the fact that when our freedoms and liberties were threatened, that we did the right thing and fought to keep them while uniting it and accepting each other for who they are and for what they believe. I ask that you keep our children, freedoms, and God before the almighty dollar and lead by example. We need to stand with first responders and other U.S. citizens that are against the mandates. Holding money over our heads to coerce us is unlawful. Perhaps Pembroke could take the lead and ask neighboring schools this time in sending another letter to DESE, let them know that we're no longer asking, we're telling them. We no longer will comply to any mandate, and it's the parents who make the decisions that work best for the family, while also pointing out that we did not receive response to our first letter. Their silence is rude and tells me they don't care. It's their way or nothing. We need to let them know that this is unacceptable, and unlike them, we do care. And their non-response speaks volumes. There is strength in numbers, and the data speaks for itself, not Dr. Salaries, and I strongly suggest that they get a second opinion. There are plenty of well-known and respected doctors that are experts included, like Peter McCullough and Dr. Robert Malone. Quite simply, we've had enough. Let's come together, do the right thing, so we can all sleep a little better at night, knowing that we stood up for what is right and for our children who are being silenced. We need to let freedom ring. I ask you, please, lead by example and make our children to be strong and fearless leaders. Teach them that the coercion is not acceptable, and if something seems wrong and feels wrong, then question it respectfully and stand up for what's right. We, as a community, cannot let our children down. Thank you for letting my voice be heard. And I just close with the great words of Thomas Jefferson: rebellion to tyranny is obedience to God.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. So Thursday, when students return to school at the high school, they'll be seated at cafeteria tables. There hasn't been any school since you sent me the email, because the high school has been having exams. I think you raised a couple of points in your letter. Again, I think the second communication might have just gone to Susie, because I did just check and I didn't get your second one, but I was also not in the office, again, not a big deal. The masking piece, I think we have addressed, and I know that not all of you can come to every meeting every time, because it is a huge amount of time commitment, but I do suggest that if you have questions, that you go back and look at some of the minutes, because we did talk about the transition from, not using instructional time to remind students for masking, taking the focus off of that. Obviously, it shifted a little when the quarantine and isolation guidance changed from 10 days to 5 days, because that is predicated on mask wearing for the additional 5 days. But I do think, as much as I've gotten emails from parents, rightfully so, about the focus on masking. It seems to be more so at the secondary level than at the elementary level. Each time a concern has been brought to myself or to Principal Talbot, it has been addressed with that specific staff member, and then globally with the staff as a whole during staff meetings, during faculty meetings, during department meetings. So, I don't know that, I can't fix an experience that a student had. We can only do better and, get to a place where our expectations are clear and that staff are understanding of our expectations. And I do think we're there with the masking and the reminders, right? We don't want to be using instructional time for that. And I'm as optimistic as you all are in the audience that we're close to the end with that. But as far as just blanketly not participating in the mandate, I think this committee has spent a lot of time, has gotten several legal opinions about what that means for them, and I understand that it seems to be driven by money, absolutely, but $14 million isn't something that we can necessarily come up with on our own. I know there was a joke the first time about we'll start a GoFundMe page, and I appreciate that, and every one of us here is somebody's parent too, and I want for my kids the same thing that you're asking for your kids. I happen to live in Hanover, so it's hard when you take something that's happening somewhere and compare it to something that's happening here. So both Hingham and Hanover participate in pooled testing, which allows them a little bit more flexibility with what they have happening in their districts, because they're randomly pooled testing staff and students. We chose not to participate in that here. So it is hard. There's not always apples to apples when you're making comparisons, but I appreciate every single one of you that sends me an email and sends me pictures and sends me screenshots, because those are resources. That's information. And, before COVID happened, this job was a full-time job before COVID. And so, putting COVID on top of that, I'm not always reading, I think Melissa Hooley sent me a petition for DECA. I hadn't seen it. And so I'm very thankful for folks that are sharing information with us. And that information is shared with the committee in hopes to make decisions that are best for our students and our community, understanding that there's certain things that are within the control of this committee and there are certain things that aren't. And I think you guys have spent a lot of time kind of delineating what you can control and kind of where you're at with it and what you can't.
Why do we have to wait even a day longer for our desks, let's say, to get back to, if you need help moving I'll
So
be
no,
there
I don't need help
tomorrow.
moving the desks. I'm happy to move them myself. And I've said this before, there's more than that goes into a decision like this than just, this would be great for kids, right? So there's collective bargaining implications to any changes we make to a working environment or structure for folks. And granted, that shouldn't be the reason why we don't do something, but sometimes it takes an extra day or so to get to that point, and having to have the conversation with everybody involved to make sure they understand the expectations. As I said before, we've been sitting at lunch tables at the middle school this whole time, but there's been 2 students at the lunch table. So I need to make sure that the staff at the middle school know that we can go back to regular seating, and that the desks need to be moved from here, and that the high school tables need to come out, and we need to make plans for what it looks like for the study halls and the other courses that are meeting in the cafeteria. So there's more than just, that's a great idea, let's do it. I do think this committee meets very frequently, and I do think the turnaround time on what is brought to us outside of how things are policy supposed to work as far as agenda items. This committee is very accommodating to the requests of parents, and I don't think you get that everywhere. And I think, I'm thankful to work with this group of individuals, and I'm thankful to work with all of the staff we have here. But sometimes it takes more than just the idea. There's a couple of action pieces that need to happen before we can pull the trigger, and we move as fast as we possibly can. I promise.
I appreciate it, but I also think there's strength in numbers, and I don't know why you can't, like I said, join together with all these neighboring towns. I think with all, and I'm not just speaking for the town of Pembroke, I'm thinking all of us have had it with COVID, and I think that if you
Right,
just-
and we do, we're a part of a South Shore
Yeah.
Roundtable, the school committee is part of a like
So if Desi's
community.
not responding, though, that's the whole thing. I mean, and I know you just read before I read the thing about how they have a litigation going. I
But
mean,
let me
there's a
just-
reason for that.
Let me just kind of cut, because why can't we join together? The problem is I don't think the numbers are there. I think what you see in Pembroke, what you see in Hanover, what you see in Middleborough, Dayton, Rehoboth, Sandwich, if you look at the 250 or 60 school committees across the Commonwealth, I don't think that right now is the overwhelming number. And I'm judging that off of that email that I read, or part of it that I read, was part of a long string of a bunch of committee members from different towns jumping in. And it's the same, the reason why I can tell you that the communities who I think are like-minded to us, because they're speaking, but then they'll get 5 others who will say no. That was part of a string where somebody asked a question, I think it was somebody from DR, Dayton Rehoboth, asked a question about the mask mandate. It kind of spiraled into a bunch of other stuff. And not overwhelmingly, in that thread, there were more people saying, oh no, let's stay status quo, than people saying, let's change. That, which I
get it.
yeah.
I get there's two sides,
So,
but I mean, if you're listening to CNN and the regular news, you're gonna or whatever. If you know the truth,
listen.
then you know the truth. I personally, I don't want my son tested, and I don't want him wearing a mask. It's enough. It's enough. As it is, he could participate at track at Reggie Lewis, but yet if he makes, the music at Symphony, the honors, they're told they can't attend that.
because of where they have it, which
But it's student-based. Anything that involves students, you can participate in Boston, but yet, so they're picking, and I'm not saying you guys, I'm saying they're picking and choosing.
Absolutely.
And you guys need to, you need to fight for that. Like, if somebody earns something, an award or whatever, and can go into Boston, I would hope that you guys would back that and just be like,
we're going to try and get ahead of the DECA situation now, even though, Aaron and I were talking about this before we walked in, they haven't had sectionals and state, whatever it is, they haven't had the first to figure out how many districts, thank you. They haven't figured out who's going to states, but we know that the states, because it's in Boston and they can't move it for lots of different reasons, we're trying to get ahead of that to figure out, the question I asked Aaron when I heard about it, because I didn't think about it, even though my kids have been there, was, okay, why can't they? If they're not, they choose not to stay over, and plenty of kids haven't stayed over. You've had athletes
There's a
who've
day
had to
option, yep.
why are they choosing to do it? And it's because of their interpretation. We're going to ask them to change or have an accommodation, because that's segregation. There's no other way to get
well,
around
the
it.
same has to be done for the Papa Singers, too.
I don't
There's five-
disagree.
the
I didn't
five.
know about that until,
Yeah.
right, but I did know we sent them to the seaport because we've approved that overnight trip many times.
But on top of it, can you answer to why are you, is the detention thing gone now?
So
If
as
somebody
I've
doesn't-
said before, there has not been one detention delivered for inability to wear
maybe not
masks.
delivered, but threatened?
So again, the focus of masking has shifted. Our expectation is that, it is still the right of the teacher to remind students to wear their masks appropriately. Again, the change in the guidance for isolation and quarantine is predicated on mask wearing for 5 days. There's nobody happier than I am that kids aren't missing 10 days of school, and now it's down to 5. But I think even more so, there's a nervousness amongst other students and amongst staff around the fact that you used to have to stay home for 10 days, now you only have to stay home for 5. And so reminding students of proper mask wearing is still part of what it looks like in school, regardless of the level. I know Mark has talked extensively with staff about it not taking up instructional time, and I haven't seen in my time at the middle school, high school, North, Pembroke, Bryantville, or Havelock, teachers taking time out of instruction to remind students to wear masks. The focus isn't that. It's happening during passing. There's global reminders during the announcements that are played at lunch blocks. Again, totally reasonable.
Again, I walked right into that Papa concert, and he said it right in my ear, love seeing the masks. I just don't think it's.
So I think Mark was talking about that specific clear mask that the first time we saw it, because I also went to every single concert. I saw the zipper mask. I saw the slit masks. I think he was making a connection with somebody about the mask.
Okay.
I don't.
That's correct.
He wasn't standing up
Plastic
saying, I want
porous
masks for everybody.
Light that mask.
Okay.
I don't see a problem with that. I think it reinforces the kids. They're doing the right thing,
Okay. It's really not the right. Thank you.
Anybody else have a comment? Because I don't want to forget to vote on this. That's fine. Of that one? Okay. Hold on, Maureen. He's going to switch out your mic.
Hello, good evening. I just want to say thank you, Pam, for those words. You spoke so eloquently, and I couldn't have said it any more perfect than everything you just said. And thank you so much for taking the time and caring about our kids enough to stand up here and say those words, because they're so true. I find you to be complicit. Your silence. You stand on our hands are tied by Desi. That's basically, I feel, a cop-out. I'd like to see some action, some kind of resistance, some kind of effort besides a phone call to a friend, and the answer is no. I would like you to make more efforts on behalf of our children's mental health. Can you at least maybe acknowledge that you agree that there's a mental health impact to your complicity?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Well, first of all, I don't think we can say, because I would personally disagree that we've been complacent in our role here. And we do recognize, I think you were here at the meeting in December where we looked at the social and emotional issues that our children are having. Jess, I think, gave us detailed numbers, the number of hospitalizations we're seeing. I can tell you this, I know the number of parents that have reached out to me that I've advocated for with the administration or helped them in different ways has increased fivefold since I've been here. So we understand, we recognize it, we've put as much as we can so far, and we're still thinking ahead of what else we can do. I think you saw some of that in the budget presentation. I guess the question I would have for you say you want to see action. Can you give me 1-2 points that we would like us to do?
Yes.
Because I think every time we've been asked, we've gone ahead as long as it was something we could do.
I agree. You have been supportive in things that we have asked of you. I absolutely will give you that. Absolutely. I do not take that from you.
So that wouldn't be complacent.
However,
So
in regards to Desi,
Yep.
and falling in line to them, I understand that there's a Massachusetts superintendent group that meets, that I believe that the head of the Department of Education is also a part of.
So there are roundtables. There's regional roundtables. So there's a South Shore roundtable, there's a Metro West, and so the representatives from those roundtables do have the opportunity to meet with Commissioner Riley. He doesn't attend each of the individual roundtable meetings, but I think it's important to just emphasize a point that Mike made. Here on the South Shore, I think there are many like-minded superintendents and school committees. That is not necessarily the majority in the state, and so I can say with certainty on the calls that I've been on that have involved superintendents statewide, that the majority of folks are interested in maintaining the masking. So, you know, we absolutely, as a South Shore group, advocate for, you know, our health data here is vastly different than Chelsea or Lawrence, and we continue to use that point when we communicate through our roundtable with Commissioner Riley. But that's not necessarily the same message that he's getting from everybody, and it is a numbers thing. When we talk about everything, whether it's Chapter 70 funding or even response to requests that we make, it has to do with where the numbers are, and those lie in urban districts. I mean, that is not a new phenomenon. That has always been the way it has been here, but I can say with certainty that the South Shore group of superintendents, the South Shore group of school committees has been advocating for the local decision piece. This committee has supported and has stood by their decision from August 24th that given the chance, we all believe it should be parent choice.
Superintendent Aubrey, in any roundtables recently have you attended? Have you vocalized the request for the local governments over our school committee? And in what way in which did you communicate that, please?
So roundtables happen virtually. We had Lighthouse, which is our South Shore group, just last week. It meets every 2 weeks. And so then the representative from that group is Liz Legalt, who is the superintendent in East Bridgewater. She takes that feedback back to DESE through the larger roundtable. So I have advocated wholeheartedly for the fact that our data here in Pembroke is even vastly different than some of our neighboring communities. You know, the roundtables have written letters. Tom Scott, who is the director of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, has written letters.
Have you signed the
of
letters?
Superintendents, I'm sorry.
On your behalf, or
Excuse me?
are those letters on your behalf?
The letters are on behalf of superintendents, right? So there's a letter from the South Shore Roundtable that is advocating for local decisions. Tom Scott, who represents the state group, is not always advocating for a local decision because, again, that is not the majority consensus here in the state of Massachusetts is for local decision on masking.
Another effort I would like to see is when you meet with Josh Cutler, I'm sure you meet with him often regarding finances. Have you made any efforts in communicating with Representative Cutler?
We've reached out to Josh a couple of times. I met with him, it was in the early fall. So, and we
Complacency.
I don't believe that's complacency. So we're going to have to agree to disagree. And if we're just going to keep going back to complacency, I'm going to need to move on to somebody else.
Sure, I'll be happy to move on to another issue.
Right, but just a reminder to us parents, you are constituents of a community. You can also reach out to Josh Cutler. You can also reach out to DES.
I have.
Commissioner Riley.
Thank
right?
you, I
So,
have.
you know, I know that there are groups of you that have done that as well.
I got to stop. What do you think is complacency? How do you spend time? You spend time at our meetings. Do you spend time asking us what we're doing outside and the time we're looking and doing research on the data? Do you ask us what we do when we're talking with the superintendent about this, trying to figure out other
I'd be happy to hear what you have to do, sir.
Let me finish. I haven't interrupted you once in any of the meetings you've spoken. You've spoken in some cases for well over a half hour before taking a break. So let me finish. Have you ever asked us what we're doing outside of here when we're having conversations, so we're preparing so that we can change the testing protocols that we're talking about tonight? Have you ever asked us what else we're doing when we meet with the other districts to find out what they're doing in the research to see if we can do something? What you say is you sit here and you want to say complacency. I don't think you understand what else goes into this. You might see 2 hours in a night, but I'll guarantee you there are weeks where I've spent 20-plus hours, and I could show you the meetings, on school issues related to COVID, okay? Not because I'm sitting here and somebody's saying, oh, you have to. No, it's because I'm trying to make the district better. If you just sit there and say we're being complacent, it's either you're not paying attention or you're not asking the right questions. And I'm sorry, I really take a lot of restraint when I sit here, but saying something like that over and over again, I personally find insulting. And I'll stop there.
Standing here tonight, I'm trying to find out what you're doing. So this, please accept this as my question to you. What are you doing? And that's what I'm asking. It's been 2 years, and I am sorry that my delivery can be improved, and I agree it can be improved. But my intent is for the mental health of all these kids, and yours as well. I understand that you have the kids' interest as well. I don't know what to do. What do I do? What do?
I understand that, and believe me, we're
Who
trying,
do I call? I call all those people. What do I do? You tell me.
so the one thing that, I'll tell you what I told every other parent who's asked. First of all, just as Erin said,
I don't,
talk to the representative, talk to the senator, right, call into the governor's office. They listen to voters. They do, which is why they changed between August 17th and October 31st, when we met, when we had local control on the 17th, it got pulled away on the 24th, and we met the following week, August 24th. Why'd that happen? It happened because it doesn't take a rocket science to figure out what happened. There were two bills that were pre-filed, one in the Senate and one in the House, to require masking. They also heard from the cities where the voting block is, so they heard from voters. That's why they changed. If you look at the governor's comments and you Google what the governor said on August 16th, because she and I spoke on the afternoon of August 16th, because the governor came out that day and said, I believe in local control. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he said. And then on that Friday morning at 7:15 a.m., I got a text that said, do you have a second? That's never a text you want to get as a school committee member. I'll tell you this, I've gotten probably 4 of those in my 21 years of doing this, and none of them have been a good response. We talked about 7:30, it was, they're going to require state mass after we had just voted, and if you were at the meeting, it was a pretty contentious meeting. There were a couple people who,
I remember it well.
I will never forget that one. But if you think, if what happened, people got to the elected and appointed officials. That's what changes. We can sit here and I can tell you this, we can do everything we can as 5 people, but if 100,000 people signed a petition saying, get the masks off of kids, I think you'd get a little bit change at the State House. I think they would listen, right? I don't know how many people showed up. I'll finish in 1 second, I promise. I don't know how many people showed up. There was supposed to be a rally today at the
In Malden.
in Malden at the
Desi.
Desi meeting.
Yep.
I don't know how big it was. I know the last couple that they've talked about haven't been that large. They're going to listen to people like that, just as we listen to people when people ask us, whether it's 10 people or whether it's 50 people or 2. We listen. That's where it comes down to. That's where, when Pam was talking about, that's where the strength in numbers comes from. So, sorry.
Well, just to back up on that, I happen to grow up in Malden. I'm very familiar with the streets. They did a rolling rally down the streets with people, all pro-mask, all pro-remote learning, basically everything that we're standing here that, again, respectfully, I'm on your side. Am I getting a little angry being called complacent? Yes, I've got 2 kids in the system. I bleed for this, but I also understand how this whole thing plays out. But I said, we may be like-minded on the South Shore, but when you get into Springfield, Worcester, Boston, they have way more voters, way more representatives. We have Josh Cutler that represents parts of 3 towns. We have Senator Moran, I think, that comes out of
Yes.
Falmouth or somewhere. You know what I'm saying? Boston has 6, 8, 10, 12 of these people. Their voice is going to be louder than ours. Now, again, I'm not trying to reiterate Mike's statement. You get all these people sitting here, and they start sending letters to Josh Cutler, to Senator Moran, to Governor Baker, Desi guy, Riley, whoever. They're going to realize that. That means something. But again, our hands are tied to a certain extent of what we can do and can't do. And I hate to say, we have to play within the rules. We want to be defiant. Yes, okay. They want to hold back $14 million in funding. Respectfully, I don't know anyone sitting there, if you guys make $14 million a year and can spare a few, there we go. I don't, you know what I'm saying? But I said, if you look at the big picture, and again, we have kids in the system, almost all of us. Susie's not here tonight. This is troubling for us. I've got a 9th grader, I've got an 11th grader. I'm watching what they're going through. They're in the band, they're in different, activities. This is killing me to a certain extent, but I also understand there's a bigger picture here. So at times I feel like people look at us like we're the enemy, that we're not doing anything. Again, I've had people come to my house. A woman came and knocked on my door at 11:30 at night. She was so upset. I opened my door and I had a cup of tea with the woman. Okay? So you're not seeing that. And I respectfully say that. I always joke, I can't go to Stop and Shop because if I do, the frozen food melts before I get to the counter. okay? If one more person tells me they pay my salary, which I think is hysterical, because we're all volunteers, I had a guy tell me I have to listen because he pays my salary and he won't pay me anymore. And I said, didn't know I had a new boss. Kind of nice to meet the guy. So I don't want to sound and say I'm not 100% on your side, but I'm also not 100% not on your side. There's a bigger picture at work here. And believe me, this is my second term on the committee. I learn something new every time I sit in one of these meetings. My heart bleeds for this, but I said for every woman and gentleman like yourself that comes up and speaks to us, there are some people on the other side that say, I want my kids wearing masks, or if my kid's the only one wearing masks in school, he's going to be ridiculed, he's going to be picked on. You know, we have to hear all of that. And again, I just talked to my daughter about this before I came here. I have to do what's best for the student body at Pembroke, for the teachers, for the faculty, for the administration. So, again, to say we're complacent, like I said, next time someone shows up on my doorstep at 11:30, I'd love to call you and maybe you can come over and be complacent with me. But I need you to understand, and hopefully I'm speaking for the rest of the committee, we care so much about this. Like I said, I'm like shaking. I am so kind of upset right now that people think I'm not doing my job. Like I said, this is a volunteer job. I grew up around education. I believe in this. But to have people in an audience sit there and tell me I'm complacent, you know, like Mike said, I'm kind of losing my cool, and I apologize for going off on a bit of a tangent, but I think you need to understand what these people do.
I appreciate seeing emotions, to be honest with you.
Well, thank you.
I do, because it makes me think that you actually get it. And I'm glad that I got emotions and that that's how we feel, and we're all feeling this. And regarding money, I ask about the CARES money that the Plymouth Council has given the Select Board to allocate, and the school district, believe, is receiving monies. I'm concerned if all of the fine print has been read regarding, are there strings that we must continue with mandates to receive that money?
Sure. So the CARES funding expired on December 31st of 2021. So all of those funds from Plymouth County have been applied for and mostly received on the town side. Some of the other pockets of money have strings attached in the sense that there's certain usages for them, but there's not any fine print that says you must do what the state tells you. Obviously, there's accounting procedures that happen with any type of grant funding, whether it's from the state or the federal government, and we comply with that for every one of our grants, even prior to COVID. There's reporting requirements and whatnot, but there's no
COVID requirements?
There's no COVID
Could you
requirement.
explain, could you explain what they're targeted for? So much targeted for learning loss?
Sure, yep.
Infrastructure?
Yep, so the CARES funding through Plymouth County, which we, were able to get a large portion of money from last year, is targeted towards COVID relief. So that was for, PPE for students and staff, for,
Capital.
police, for all kind of, public safety. The ESSER money, so the elementary, secondary education recovery money, is targeted towards interrupted learning and putting in place supports and structures for students to make up for the lost instructional time. There's a piece of it that's specifically for special education students. There's the SR2 money is very similar to that. It is an extension of SR1, so a larger pot of money for student support in the form of interventions for reading and math and other academics. SR3, which is the largest pot of money, is a little bit different. That one has a focus of capital replacement and capital projects. So it gives us some flexibility to use funding for HVAC units. I know the town has used some of their ARPA funds, so ARPA is the same as ESSER on the school side. It has allowed the town to do some improvements to the water system here in Pembroke. So those are really infrastructure grants, but again, there's no COVID requirement associated with them. There's just a timeline in which they need to be used, which is exactly what all of the funds we ever get. There's always a timeline that they need to be used within.
That applies to the new money that's going to be coming allocated in the budget this coming.
So our budget is based off of Chapter 70, and then the town, the 2.5 related to taxes. Everything that's in our fiscal budget from the town has a 1-year time frame, a July 1 to June 30th. That's the only time that you can spend the funds in.
Does that money have COVID
No.
ties?
No.
Thank you.
And actually, the committee advocated for there to be a moratorium on the Chapter 70 enrollment because of COVID. So you know that last year, more families homeschooled than in years past. And so this committee did reach out to elected officials and ask that we be held harmless for any decrease in enrollment due to that. Again, that wasn't necessarily something that they moved forward with, but this committee continually advocates for Pembroke. Understanding that Pembroke is a smaller district, but that doesn't mean that you all don't deserve everything that everybody else gets as far as representation and support. So,
The money's in Chelsea, bro, right?
I don't want to live in Chelsea, Maureen.
Thank you.
All right, so I went through the attendance. We have one more person that wants to speak.
Thank goodness you're managing it, Pam.
But I did have Melissa texted in and just wanted to know, as far as bringing the cafeterias back, you had mentioned February 4th for the high school or something?
No, so the cafeteria at the high school will be back when students return for full days of learning on Thursday. Tomorrow is period 2 exam and makeup, right? So they're not,
So I just texted Brian Phillips to get the boys going
right.
tomorrow.
So the cafeteria tables will be in
I'm
place.
available to help if you
Yeah,
need me.
the cafeteria
but-
tables will be in place.
Before the meeting's over, we'll talk.
Okay, no, that's fine.
But
And-
contact tracing won't cease until February 4th, because
Okay,
that's when the
I
test
think
will be
her
here.
question is,
There's
what
so
about-
little contact tracing that happens at the secondary level because 76.85% of the students are vaccinated, but.
Her question was about, what about the other schools?
Yep, so there's just a little bit more involved here at the elementary schools because there's about a couple hundred desks in the cafeteria, and some of our teachers are using the cafeteria seating for mask breaks. So we just, I know that our elementary principals will be meeting with grade level teams tomorrow to talk about the alternative spaces for mask breaks, because some of them are using the cafeteria for that. So I would expect that by the end of this week, everybody should be back to cafeteria tables. Some of them are in storage units outside of the school, so we just got to get them back in. But
Okay, all right.
the target is for the end of this week.
All right, and I am seriously available if you need me to help. And then I think just Dan has to come up. Thank you, and thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. And thank you so much for the opportunity to speak and ask questions. The parents really appreciate that, no matter what side you stand on, the ability to come up and express concerns and ask questions and stuff. Thank you so much. I had questions about Camp Borndale. Is it canceled this year?
So we didn't have Camp Borndale last year or the year before. It's not necessarily canceled. I don't think we've looked at the overnight portion of it just yet. But I know that Artie, who runs Camp Borndale, communicates with us frequently. I know that the property is for sale too. So I think some of that plays into it, but it's not off the table for us.
Oh, that's awesome. I would just like
Yep.
to advocate for it. It's such a, I don't know in the school board if you guys know Camp
yeah.
Borndale.
Yep.
It sounds like it's a very memorable experience,
It
a rite of
absolutely is.
passage
Right.
for
Yep.
us sixth graders, and I would just like to advocate for that. Things are a little different than 2019, 2020. Now, teachers can be vaccinated, sixth graders can be vaccinated. It seems like circumstances are a little different this year, and I hope you guys take that into consideration.
Absolutely.
Who makes that decision?
So it's an administrative decision as far as kind of where.
Three principals and then you probably?
Right, so I wouldn't want just one school to be offering Camp Borndale as an option. It's really, everybody has to be on the same page, because you'll remember we used to have a situation where buildings went to different places, and we kind of standardized it to be Camp Borndale, because we do believe in the educational value of that. If our students are going to miss 5 days of school, we want to make sure that the instruction piece of it is really strong. I'm not sure if Camp Borndale is entertaining overnight guests right now for school trips, but I will happily look into that and meet with the three principals and put together our plan for that. I know we talked in the past about offering a day option if they weren't having an overnight option, but we can absolutely do some more work on that and share out kind of what we find.
What's the date? Because when my kids went, they went in the fall. So what's the date?
So we moved to a May date
It's
a
May.
couple years ago, yeah, so.
Okay, so.
Well,
we can-
and
we
I've
can-
heard the same thing, that he passed away, so
Yeah.
Borndale's kind of in transition.
So.
Right, it's been for sale for a while, so.
They're still kind of advertising and everything. I was on the website today.
Yeah, I know that
and they're
they
still-
did run their summer camp last year, I believe, their boys camp that they do. They didn't run it the year prior, but they did run it last year, so I'm absolutely happy to look at it.
So let's do it this way. We have February 15th or March 1st. We have meetings scheduled. Can we get an update for Camp Borndale on one of them?
Absolutely. Probably March 1st,
Can we-
because
is that
February
okay?
15th.
So
Oh,
Mark-
I love the idea,
Yeah.
and if you want to bring in students or
No,
maybe
no,
some
we-
parents.
Oh, we've done that.
Okay.
There was, many years ago, there was a reason it got canceled, I don't remember when, and it was You think you've seen a lot of people here at meetings now? This place was packed because of it, and this is going back probably 15 years ago. And just trust me, my kids are older, and they still, this came up within the past couple months, just them going back to nature's classroom. So it's something that this committee and this administration is firmly behind. We just have to have a place to go.
Right.
Yes.
So let's, March 1st, mark on your calendar, we will have an update. Natalie, put it on the future agenda items. We'll get an update for it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I was just going to make a recommendation. Last August, we put out a survey to the families and parents about mask mandates. It doesn't seem that current right now. It would be wonderful to have that information, that data, like going forward as you guys make decisions, where the parents stand, and maybe like a real simple question, are you for the mask mandates? Yes or no? And then maybe another one, would you be for a vaccine mandate? Yes or no? That data might be really important as you guys are making decisions in the future.
Right, I think the only kind of downfall to that is when you're asking a parent or a family their opinion about something, you create you create the feeling that their opinion can affect the decisions of the state, right? And so when we surveyed back in the summer, it was about finding out where parents were when it was local control and informing the decision of the committee. At this point, it's not within the purview of the committee to decide about a vaccine or a masking
Yeah, we wouldn't
mandate.
set a vaccine mandate. Right, I think by what we voted on.
No, it would just be nice to see where we all stand. Is it a divisive issue, or it might be 80%, you know? I think the parents would love to see where we all stand, you know, or like how close are we together, or are we really far apart? Is this like a real decisive issue? Because everybody I talk to in town, they kind of, you know, they're against the mandate, you know? And that's just me. I might be in a little bubble of my own.
I understand what you're saying. Can we think, I'm not trying to cop out. I'm trying to think of what because if we put something like that out, we wouldn't, there's been no discussion here about wanting to put a vaccine mandate, and I think everybody knows what we voted on on August 24th.
But they're already talking about it in the town, you know, Cambridge is already talking about it.
So-
They're already talking about it, we know that.
So, again, she'll correct me, I know she'll correct me if I'm wrong, she always does, in a good way. I think the only one that could put a vaccine mandate would be the Board of Health, and the Select Board could do it for employees.
Correct.
Right, so nobody on this board has ever brought it up, wanted to do it. Wouldn't even think of it as an option, but just so you know, it can be done outside of this group. The Board of Health can put in a mask mandate. They have opted not to. The town manager put in a mask mandate for town buildings. We did get a legal opinion. It does not apply to school buildings, which is why we are sitting here the way we are. The town select board, because we had to find this out because when the federal mandate was in effect, or almost going to be in effect, or whatever, that the town could have done that, because municipal employees were exempt. But the town,
there was an
the
OSHA
select
piece to
board, the select board can set a mandate for town employees. And that would technically supersede anything we could do. So let us think of what we would survey and how we'd survey and what we could do with the data. And can we tell you next meeting, which is next Tuesday?
Okay.
For example, like, to his point, it would be really helpful information when we have all of these overnight trips coming up where there's vaccine mandates elsewhere. And, you know, I have my own opinion, but I don't want to, you know, if the whole town is like, you know, I don't care that there's a vaccine mandate, like, I want my kid to go. You know, like, if the whole town thinks that, it would be nice to know.
Right, I think we like to collect survey data that informs the decision that we're able to make, and I'm just not sure what decision this committee's making around mask or vaccine mandates, but we can maybe come up with some creative questions to just get a pulse in the community.
Should, like, maybe a question like, should we follow the DESI guidelines or something? Maybe
But
we
that
could
makes
do
it
that
seem as though
question.
following the mask mandate is an option.
So
And
let us,
okay.
We'll find a way to phrase it to get a pulse.
Just the data's
hear what you're
nice,
saying.
like, anytime I make a decision, I want to try to get as much information as
Absolutely. Right. That's
possible.
what
And
we
it
do.
seems like we're chasing pennies around a round room.
Which
you
is
know, we're not
why,
getting
you know-
anywhere with this. And it's just, if we get the data and it's 80% or 70%, or maybe we're real close and there's not much we can do. But if it's super overwhelming, it might embolden some of the parents to write letters, get more involved. Maybe we're going to be out there with the rolling caravan like they were in Malden today, you know? We
I'll
don't
try to
have
think of a way
those
to-
resources right now, but we might if we know the numbers.
If anything, this committee has asked for and tried to get as much data as we could for anything. And the reason why I say that is we have taken criticism publicly about requesting, our last letter to DESE, asking for the data. And to me, it was a simple ask. Just tell me what the hurdle is that we have to overcome besides the 80%. That's one, they were clear on that. What is the hurdle that they're looking to overcome to change the 2/28 date, right? What are they looking at? That's all. And that's all we're trying to understand. And to me, that's what we should be doing, because we have to ask for data. As we looked at, right, in the past couple of weeks, I looked at the governor's letter, which had the stats that Aaron talked about, or Jeff Riley's letter that came out last week. I spent a lot of time looking at the UCF, University of Central Florida, did probably one of the most complete mask studies. I'm not going to bore everybody with the details, but it had some interesting things that was new to me. And those are the things, I know we look at individually, as well as this, like I looked at the COVID-19 dashboard before we came in tonight. We're always looking at data. That's what I meant by we're doing lots of work outside of here.
I totally understand you, but if it
more
doesn't
data.
matter anyways, why even waste your time? Because we're going to do what DESE does anyways. So, that's why I'm just maybe that we can add that to our letter when we're writing back DESE,
I get it.
80% of the population
Completely get
or
it.
whatever it is. Yeah.
Completely get it, yep. No, you're in. I
Thank
think
you
we're
guys so
gonna-
much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Pam, you look like you want to ask something else.
No, well, actually, I will just say that as far
What?
as I went to the rally in Boston, and the paper said there were a couple hundred. I just want you to know, it's wrong. It was like, when you said there's not much, there were probably 2,000, maybe a little under 2,000 people there, so that's wrong. But other than that, I appreciate all you do, and thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so if we don't have anything else, we do have a motion on the table, and let me reread it. To shift to at-home testing protocol, ceasing test to stay and contact tracing as of 2/4. The motion was from Sue, second by David. Any other discussion or comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, it is unanimous, thank you. Okay, so now let's move, because we do have three other things real quick to do, or two other things, three other things. Minutes, facilities usage, and DECA. So just to get everybody up to speed, and then Sue hop in. DECA, there's three levels to DECA. There's districts which are at the Quincy Marriott, or have been at the Quincy Marriott, got snowed out about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Two weeks ago. Then the next, for the students who qualify, depending upon different qualifications, they can move on to states, which has been held in Boston. They usually stay in Copley Place. That because of the city's mask and vaccine mandate, they are requiring students who participate in DECA states to be vaccinated if they want to participate, because there's a meal component, overnight component. There's no way we can get around
Right, it's held at the
and
Heinz
participate.
Convention Center.
Right.
which has
Now,
no-
that said, we do not know how many students are going to go. Traditionally, Pembroke has done extremely well. Mary Ellen Gates runs a great DECA program. My daughters both went through it, have done very well, and she does a phenomenal job with that group. So at Sue's urging, we are talking about asking DECA to have an alternative to in-person for the students who qualify. The reason why, they can't change the venue, because the number of venues of that magnitude, there aren't many in Massachusetts, right? And I think the other one would be DCU Center, and that's a problem. I don't think there's enough hotel space. And even if there was, they're still the same boat, I think, in Worcester as they are in Boston or close to it. So that's the issue. Does everybody understand what the issue is?
And we've checked, they've made no accommodations whatsoever for people who can't be vaccinated, like maybe there's like a medical exemption, or there is no accommodation. You're either vaccinated or you can't participate. And it's just really not fair to the kids who can't be vaccinated or aren't vaccinated, you know? That's 25% of our student population overall, right, at the high school. And even if it was one, you know, it's discriminatory. So they should come up with some kind of an accommodation for those who can't go physically and be there. Or, you know, maybe there's some sort of an exception, like, you know, the Museum of Science is doing for student groups where they don't have to be vaccinated and, you know, for field trips or whatever. They should do something for the students. It's not right.
Yeah, no, we heard your thing
Can
about
we,
the-
yeah, can we include all state in that as well?
What we
for
can
the
do
course?
is, let's,
Oh, yeah,
'cause
for
we're gonna
course
go
as
direct,
well.
we're gonna go directly to DECA with this.
Yep.
So what I would ask as the follow-up is, let's figure out what else this impacts between now and probably next meeting, because there could be, I don't know, we do participate in like the Dartmouth relays for track, or the Brown relays we've done in the past. Let's figure out all the overnight trips that could fall into this, because I don't know
This
all-
one isn't overnight, it's just performing it at Symphony
It-
Hall.
it
if
It
you
actually
get
is overnight. My son participated in it.
No,
so
I'm talking the,
For all states.
The all state for the, yeah.
It's actually a weekend, and my son participated in it
Oh,
2
okay.
different years, and it is an overnight, and it would be a vaccine requirement as well, so.
Okay,
let
yeah,
us
and
get
I
the
did forward
inventory.
some information to Gwen that I'm happy to forward to you, Erin, if you want, just flyers from like the Reggie Lewis Center where it's just like there's number 4, I forget what it is in
Right, our
front of me.
kids are going to the Reggie Lewis Center right now.
Yeah, but there is like a list of rules and it says that like as long as they belong to a school that they're allowed in there. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
It's,
Yeah, well, they should make some kind of accommodation, I
Yeah.
agree, so.
okay.
I think, we definitely get it. I think, you know, thanks to Sue for bringing the DECA issue forward.
Yeah.
Just gonna let us look at the others, so we make sure let's get them all done at twice. We'll do one tonight, and we'll do the rest of them either the next week or the week after or something. Is that fair?
I appreciate it. Yeah, and I'll forward the information that I
Please,
have.
please do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, you wanna go?
Yeah. I maybe don't have the same 2 things that you just said, probably that's what a draft
No, we're gonna-
communication
we're gonna
is
do this one,
for.
but then the next one
Right,
will come back
so
with
what
this.
I asked in this communication was
you wanna see
for
them?
request to be twofold. First, that you seek a venue that does not have a vaccination requirement, though I understand you're saying that there isn't an option. And second, that if the changing the venue is not possible, that you work with the venue to provide a testing option for students, right? So there's got to be some sort of accommodation, whether it's a medical exemption or a testing option for folks. You know, I do think, as originally asked, you asked about an online opportunity for folks. The logistics associated with that is something that DECA was not looking to explore. Mary Ellen Gates did share that information when I requested just some follow-up.
Can we, go- I mean,
Yeah.
Mary Ellen came back and said that changing venue is not possible, right? They have a
But they
contract.
have a 6-year contract with the
Yeah,
High
they have a
School Center,
contract, and
right?
those contracts are tough to get out of anybody who's ever organized any size event at a hotel.
But I do find it hard, given the current status of how education is and the use of technology, that they couldn't come up with a virtual component.
Exactly, do
Find it hard?
something.
It's
To
an
believe.
understatement. That's hard to believe. I know, that's an understatement,
Yeah, I
isn't
mean,
it?
these
Yeah.
guys are rigged for having conferences around the world.
Let's,
Right?
Why couldn't they try? I mean,
let's even go one step further. So say you have a vaccinated student who qualifies, who contracts COVID 2 days before.
Yeah,
They're out too.
right.
So where in other situations, they would be able to
They could
use
do it.
a virtual option. So I think what we should do is, can we modify this to ask for a virtual option for students who vaccinate or potentially contract COVID right before the event?
I'll go one more, and if they say no, I want to know why. If they say, no, we're not going to do it, why? Come back and tell me it costs too much, or we're going to lose money, or whatever. I mean, that's what I'd want to know.
Right,
I mean,
and as you
a
know, I can
parent.
put whatever you want in the letter, but what you get for a response is what you get for a response.
Oh, yeah, no. They tell us a pound sand,
Yep.
but I mean, I just,
Listen, I mean, we
Virtual
can even
option,
acknowledge, we understand the
vaccinate,
logistic issues. However, what we've learned is we have to be flexible. And
we're constantly evolving in this,
with
so you've got to be able to make some kind of exceptions.
is everybody okay with that parameters?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think definitely, everything you just said.
So we'll focus just on,
Yeah, because there's nothing we can do about the venue.
Right, so a virtual
It's too late
option
to
and
change
then an alternative to the vaccination requirement, whether it's a testing option, medical exemption, something.
something.
Yeah, something similar, maybe we can provide examples of other
Yeah,
venues.
I can
and-
copy and paste, so, I mean, even like the TD Garden allows folks that have been positive within the last 90 days to use that positive result for entry. They're not even allowing that.
There you
Yeah,
So-
which is crazy. That's just unfair to the students. It really is. Yeah, so a test option, they should,
A virtual option or a test or medical exception option. Okay.
Is that fair? So because this is going to have all of our names to it, is there a motion to authorize the superintendent to send the letter to DECA on our behalf as amended?
So moved.
second.
Motion by David, second by Sue. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, it is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Erin, for that. Okay, last two things. We have minutes. Let's do facilities usage. Really, this should be really quick.
Sure. In your packet, I gave you a printout of what our forms look like when you go online to rent space here. As we discussed, providing an option for folks that are doing a one-to-one tutorial or instruction of Pembroke students, having it be a percentage of receipts as opposed to the flat fee as outlined in our fee schedule. So I gave you what it looks like when you log on to the website to request space, adding in the part about how the one-to-one tutoring or instruction will be billed, how it will be audited and reconciled, as well as the form itself, which doesn't print in a manner that I can help you with, that is productive, has a drop-down for you to select that it's one-to-one. It allows you to input the student name as well as the schedule so that the proper invoice can be generated from folks. I'm not going to lie, the first couple are going to be clunky, right, because it's something new, but I don't anticipate the volume to be something that we can't manage or that that the process won't get a little bit better every time we do it. So in red on your forms are just the additional words that will appear.
Well, first of all, is there a motion to approve the facilities usage form as presented?
So moved.
Second.
I do
Okay.
have one question, Mike, and I'm not
Yep.
sure if this is the appropriate. Didn't we used to have something about like a query check or a background check or something? I didn't see it if it's,
So that's
Yeah.
all the same as our current policy.
okay, so that's there,
Yeah.
okay.
That's part of the
I
policy.
just didn't see it here, so it's okay.
No, you have to upload all of that stuff into the facility use
Okay.
form before
Yeah.
you can
I
get
just
it.
wasn't sure if it left out somewhere.
No, I think, listen, my concern was around logistics and the process. I think we got to that, so I'm good with this.
Okay,
Okay.
good to go.
So on the motion by Sue, second by Lance. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Unanimous. Okay. Last but not least, is there a motion to approve the minutes of Tuesday, December 21st, and Tuesday, December 21st, 2021, and Tuesday, January 4th, 2022?
So moved.
Motion by Sue, second by Lance. I thought so. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, unanimous. Okay. So there's no executive session. We are back next Tuesday night for the first two presentations on budget. Oh, how much time do you need for the waiver request? If we get to 80% next week, or close to 80%, should we?
Short, yeah.
Okay, is everybody okay if we consider the waiver request at the next meeting? Sure. Knowing we're at about 77% at this, right, and we're closing in on that 28? And so we at least give them, because then we won't meet for 2 weeks. Okay? And that way, if something happens while we're gone.
Be ready.
Okay, so at that point, at 8:59, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by David, second by Sue. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, it's unanimous. Thank you, and we apologize again to those at home who could not watch this in real time. Hopefully, PAC TV will get that resolved next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.